Hi, Eleanor. It's
Hi.
a pleasure to have you here and to meet you and talk a bit about your work. Can you maybe tell us a bit when you did this series of paintings, and especially because this exhibition is about landscape, it's also about the body, it's what kind of landscape we are seeing here, and somehow I really like also how there is a landscape which is imagined, but you show the creation of a landscape.
Well, all the paintings are new. I painted them all in 2022, and I, particularly for this one, wanted to decentralize the figure, so they're sort of relegated to the outer edge of the composition, and the tree is really being brought to the middle and emphasized as the main subject of the painting.
We see a tree full of beautiful blossoming flowers, and then there is a man painting with honey the little details onto these flowers. What is the narrative behind it?
I was actually inspired by a bumper sticker on my friend's car about the bees going extinct, and just knowing that in certain places pollinating insects are no longer operating. And I've actually come across some amazing photo essays of people hand pollinating different types of almond trees, and there was something so shocking about the idea that they were going to be able to touch every single flower on a tree with a little paintbrush of pollen, but also so beautiful. And of course it made me think about the language of painting, because they were using these incredible handmade brushes. So it just felt like a perfect subject to approach. And I live in New York, and at the Met in the ancient Near East wing, there are these incredible Syrian stone relief carvings, and it's this exact image with a little bucket and hand pollinating. So it's interesting to think about it as being a bit of a dystopian future, but also an ancient agricultural practice. I actually have a little bit of an approach where I think of each painting as having the same sort of compositional requirements as a song. So it's sort of like that it has to have its own balanced type of internal rhythm. So I kind of like to give the figures these broad, smoothly blended areas of color, and then punctuate it with all of these small things to create, in my mind, it's sort of like the eye moves very quickly across a broad color and then a bit more slowly across the more detailed areas. So in that way, as the eye is circulating around the painting, you're sort of getting that rhythm.
I feel like it's very kind of harmonic, peaceful settings. There is a protagonist gardening. It's maybe coming out from the post-pandemic era, where we maybe were more focused on our direct surrounding, because we could actually not go out. We were very limited in the way we could move. Was this kind of entering these images?
Exactly. For the gardening one, I actually received from my mother one of those indoor herb gardens for my kitchen, and it created kind of an alien purple light in my apartment that I became obsessed with, and I thought it would be a good challenge to see if I could create a painting where it's bathed entirely in this kind of alien light. And I was doing a bit of research and seeing that they're actually using this technique to grow plants on the space station. So it felt kind of like a bit dystopian way to garden, and that it feels kind of like ambient and pleasant, but also a bit sinister.
And the third painting over there, somehow we have a landscape that is re-sculptured, where people go into and they work on it. Like somehow I can even hear the noise of this construction space. How did it come to that idea of like a landscape that is in progress, in transition? Also
sort of post-pandemic, because during the lockdown, all of the road work was halted. So after they were allowed to get back to work in New York, it was almost like an explosion of road work where you felt like the city was regurgitating itself everywhere you went. And to me, it feels so painterly anyway to see construction workers sort of like rebuilding the streets. And I wanted a painting that kind of gave that effect of like turning back in on itself and painting itself.
And somehow also we were surrounded by a world that was more peaceful and more calmer in the pandemic times. And then maybe it was also kind of shock going back to an urban life that came back to life basically, and
Yeah.
suddenly maybe we sensed way more intensely the noises that we actually normally were used to.
Exactly, we were more sensitive to sort of like that extended periphery. For this painting, because I put the horizon line on the vertical axis rather than horizontal, I thought that the world could sort of be like a cylinder where it gets more expanded to the center and tapers towards the side. So I like the idea that the figures are kind of like surrounding you and disappearing, and that there's an implication of a whole space behind it that you can't see. They all start with very crude, just like line drawings, and I really discover the painting through the process of making them. And because I'm doing multiple layers, every subsequent layer, I take the opportunity to maybe reconfigure parts of the composition or erase something. So I'm sort of finding it as I'm going, and also trying to really make them emanate a bit of a light coming from within.
And how do you prepare them? Do you do a drawing or do you do a rendering on the computer?
I make a lot of drawings, very sketchy, sort of quick drawings on newsprint. I love that kind of looseness at the beginning because the paintings end up being so tightly resolved that I think the drawing process is the place where I can be really playful and free associative. So I make like hundreds of these newsprint sketches and then select the ones that I like the best composition and pin them up. And then every day when I come in to work on a particular painting, I'll make a fresh drawing to kind of coincide with what I'm doing that day. And it's sort of like a push and pull. I don't really use a lot of technology. I have an iPad that sometimes I'll take a photo of it and change check out a different color, just because in the past, before I would paint something and then come back the next morning, wipe all the paint off and have to do it again. So it's a bit more efficient that way.